All right, so every year, right, we see this massive global celebration of all things Irish. But behind all of that, there's a story of just one man. So today, we're going to dig in and answer the question, who really was St. Patrick?
So when you hear St. Patrick's Day, what pops into your head? It's probably this, right? Massive parades, seas of green, just a huge global party.
And of course, you've got the shamrock. I mean, that symbol is literally everywhere, on hats, banners, you name it.
So yeah, it's this huge international festival celebrating Irish culture. But here's the thing, all these modern traditions, they're a world away from the actual life of the man himself. So, let's do this. Let's peel back all those layers of legend and modern celebration and try to find the real person. Just who was the man behind the myth?
Okay, and right off the bat, here's a curveball. His story, it doesn't even start in Ireland. Nope. For that, we have to go all the way back to the late 4th century in Roman Britain. So, from what we can piece together, Patrick was born into a pretty well-off Romano-British family. And religion? Well, it was kind of the family business. His dad was a deacon, his grandpa was a priest. But Patrick himself, he actually wrote about this later, and he admitted that as a kid, he just wasn't interested, you know? Faith was something over there. It didn't really seem to have much to do with his comfortable, secure life.
And then he turned 16, and in an instant, everything, and I mean everything, he had ever known was just gone.
This is the turning point. That comfortable life is over. And what comes next is a brutal, terrifying new chapter. 6 years as a slave.
He tells us himself that raiders attacked his home. He was captured, thrown on a boat, and shipped across the sea to Ireland, where he was sold into slavery. Just imagine that. 1 minute you're a teenager at home, the next you are completely alone in a strange land, forced to work as a shepherd out on these lonely, harsh hillsides. And this contrast, this is really the heart of his entire story. On the one hand, you've got the boy in Britain, wealthy, safe, didn't really care about faith. And on the other, you have the shepherd in Ireland, an isolated slave, living in awful conditions, who, in the middle of all that hardship, found the very faith he couldn't find back when life was easy. So after 6 long years of this, he says he had a dream, and in the dream, a voice told him a ship was ready to take him home. Now what do? Well, he trusted it. He made this incredibly daring escape, traveling something like 200 miles on foot to get to the coast, and somehow he found a ship and, against all odds, made it back home to his family in Britain.
Okay, so story over, right? He's home, he's safe. But no, this is where the story takes a turn that is just unbelievable. He makes a choice that will define everything.
What does he do? He decides to go back. I mean, think about that. He chooses to return to the exact same place where he was a slave. But this time, it wasn't for revenge. He was going back with a mission.
So you've got these 2 journeys, right? The first journey, he was taken by force, a journey of suffering. The second journey was by choice, a journey of purpose. Just making that decision, that alone tells you everything about his courage and, honestly, his capacity for forgiveness.
Now, as you can imagine, over hundreds and hundreds of years, a story this incredible gets tangled up with some powerful legends. So let's try to untangle it. Let's separate the facts from the fiction.
All right, so what do we actually know for a fact? Well, from his own writings, we know he went back as a missionary, he traveled all over Ireland preaching, and he started building churches and communities. That's the history. But then you have the legends, the stories that popped up later, like the one about him using the shamrock to explain the Holy Trinity, or the most famous legend of all, that he drove all the snakes out of Ireland. So, let's talk about the snakes. Did he really do it? Well, there's a problem with that story. Scientists are pretty sure Ireland hasn't had any native snakes since the last ice age. So the story is almost certainly a metaphor. The snakes probably symbolize the old pagan beliefs, the pre-Christian traditions that his new faith was replacing. It's a really powerful image for a huge cultural shift, right?
So that brings us to the big question, his legacy. I mean, why are we still talking about this guy more than 1,500 years later? What makes his story stick? And I think the reason it endures is because it's not some grand story about a king or a superhero warrior. It's a deeply, deeply human story. It's about one person who went through something terrible, and instead of letting it break him, he managed to turn all of that pain into a powerful, lifelong mission. So in the end, if you strip away all the green beer, the parades, and even the legends, what are you left with? You're left with his real legacy. It's a story about endurance, about courage, forgiveness, transformation, and maybe most of all, it's about hope.
And that really leaves us with one final, powerful question to think about. A question that his life raises, and that's just as relevant today as it was way back then. What gives a person the strength to do that? To not just survive their pain, but to actually turn it into their purpose?